Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Lessons from Terrible Students. We are the Terrible Students. My name is Jeremy. That's Dr. Tara. Say hello, Dr. Tara.
Hello, everyone.
So, today we're going to be talking about something that, if you've had any time in the learning and development industry, you've had to deal with this particular topic. We're going to be talking about onboarding today. So, before we get too deep into that, I want to point out again that this podcast is sponsored by Lumius. At Lumius, we are your partner in learning. Okay, so like I said in our intro, today we're going to be talking about onboarding. So a lot of this episode, I am going to pass over to our resident expert, Dr. Tara. However, I do want to say that I have both been through many onboardings and I have also created a few onboardings myself. So throughout this, my contribution is more going to be kind of jumping in and giving my different experiences and things like that, while Tara is giving probably kind of the more the smarter take of it. We'll just put it like that, guys. Let's call it what it is, right? So no, just kidding. I do want to say, and I want to start with this. I want to start with, and Tara has no idea that I was going to do this. I'm going to surprise her with this because that's the
Oh
reason that I'm
boy.
here, and that's what makes it fun. And I'm going to start with mine. So I'm going to give her a couple of minutes to let her come up with hers. So I'm going to go with my best and worst onboarding experience. So Tara, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing when we come to you. I feel like everybody has had a good and bad onboarding experience before. So before we're going to get into a lot of different things about onboarding and why it's important to do it well, all that kind of stuff. But we're going to start right off with some personal experience type stuff. So best and worst onboarding experience. So for those of you that have been following the podcast, you should already know if you listened to our first episode. For those of you that are just joining us or did not listen to our first episode, my first full-time job out of college was as a cable installation technician for a local ISP. Now that local ISP is no longer around. It was bought by a larger company. But I'm still not going to mention their name here. But it was actually, looking back on it, one of the best onboarding experiences that I have had, because I was coming in as a recent college graduate, having essentially no idea what it was to install cable. I had a bachelor's degree in computer information systems. I was very good at computers. I was a 100% computer nerd and had no idea what I was getting myself into when I signed up to be a cable installation technician. So we had a 6-week onboarding training program to start with. And that first week was essentially all getting you the equipment you needed, making sure you can drive the van, and safety training. And that was the first about 2.5 days, give or take. And then you get into what they called ladder training. Now, ladder training was the last 3.5 days of that week. Now, what that was is a cable installation technician has to carry an 85-pound ladder on their shoulder. And essentially, it was 3 days in August in the South, walking around with an 85-pound ladder on your shoulder. It was... and remember, I'm telling you, this is probably one of the best onboarding experiences I had. And, at the time I hated it, right? But it really, really did. The reason I say it's the best because it really did prepare me for what I was going to have to do, because it was very close to what I was going to have to do because, every day at almost every job, we were going to have to carry that ladder around. In heat like that and weather like that, it really did prepare you for what you were going to have to do. And it let you know right at the beginning, hey, it's going to be hot. It's going to be rough. It's going to be physical. This is going to be something that you're going to have to do on a daily basis to be able to get paid and to do this job. So at the time, I was like, this is terrible. Now I look back on it like, you know what? From a learning perspective, that's a great onboarding process because A, they made sure I wasn't going to hurt myself first. They made sure I had all of my PPE and my safety stuff. And then they made me do the job. They made me actually get out there and make sure I could physically perform the activities. So, from a learner perspective, maybe it wasn't fun, but from a L&D perspective, it was a very good onboarding because I was doing what I was going to be doing in the field and becoming more proficient at it. So that was the best. Now we go to the worst. So uh, farther in my career, I'm into the learning and development side, and I go to a company that I worked for, and I'm not going to mention anything, obviously, because this is the worst, and I don't want to badmouth anybody, and I'm not even going to say when I was there. Essentially, I came on, and the role that I had interviewed for and what I thought I was coming into turns out that was not the role I was there to fulfill. They did not know what they needed. They didn't know what they wanted. And when I got there, there was essentially zero onboarding. I sat down and I already had 40 emails of stuff that I had to get done, people I had to talk to. I had no idea who any of these people were. I had meetings within 5 minutes of my first day. I was already meeting with managers and directors mid project, where I had to actually contribute in meetings and do all this kind of stuff. And it was honestly one of probably the worst onboarding experiences I've ever had, where it was like, okay, I'm just going to have to fly by the seat of my pants here until I can figure out what everybody wants and what I'm supposed to be doing, because there was like no safety net at all. It was, shoving you in there with the sharks and you just got to figure out how to swim. So I guess what I like, the worst onboarding is no onboarding. So
Yeah.
okay, so those are mine. Those are my two good and bad. So Tara, that I've given you enough time here. I've given you about 5-6 minutes. So what do you got?
Oh, well, if anybody's been reading the series I've been writing for about onboarding, you'll know that I've basically been through one
Subtle plug
onboarding in
for
my.
the onboarding blogs that we're writing on the website.
um, yeah, and I think it's the Learning Guild, I think, that's been running them for us. But basically, I have had one official onboarding experience. Um, it wasn't bad or good. I don't have anything to compare it to other than all of the ones that I have designed and built for other people that I know are better than what I've been through. But the one onboarding I went to was with, gosh, how do I protect the innocent or the guilty? Let's just say I was working in education, and big surprise. And I was hired as a full time salaried position. A lot of positions at this institution were hourly. So they did more of an orientation instead of an onboarding. There is a difference, and we'll talk about that here in a little while. But it happened 6 months after I'd already started. And it was pretty much just an overview of all the benefits, which I had already signed up for, and, how to be a good steward for our employer and that sort of thing. And it was like 5 hours of irrelevant information for me. I got a t-shirt when I left. That's about it.
Hey,
But
sure.
that was about it. That was it. And it was 4 hours out of my office. So you're 4 or 5 hours. So I can't complain about that. But it was, that was all it was. But it was way, way after I had already started. So I was like, none of this matters. And, but I do have a funny story about my first day at an organization that I'll never forget it. So I have wavy hair. And so sometimes I can look like a she wolf. Depends on the day. We're about half wolf today. I showed up for my first day on the job at this new place, and it was early in the morning. It was like 7:30, 7:45. Nobody there when I got there to like let me in the door. Once I got in the door, once somebody let me in, I sat in the reception area waiting because of course I had to get a badge and all this other stuff. And we go back and I'll never forget this. But I'm showing up, it's my first day. I had like made an effort because it was like the first day. I'd like put on some makeup, I had on a nice outfit, first day of work. And I walk back to get my badge, and the woman goes, "Do you want to do anything to your hair before I take your picture?" And I was like, "Oh my God. How bad is this?" And that was my welcome. That was my first day. So I mean, yeah, isn't that great? So and you know what?
I can one up you.
Do it.
So the same job where I had my good onboarding experience. My onboarding was actually a week after I started. So my orientation was day one. So I reported to again. I was hired as a technician, so that was field operations. But day one on Monday, I reported to corporate for orientation. I did everything you were just talking about. I did the insurance, the paperwork, all that.
Right.
Took about half a day. They gave me lunch, and then they sent me home, paid me for the day. I was like, this is great. I came back on Tuesday, and I reported to the field office where I would actually be reporting to, because they brought us all in for training at the same time, and we all report to different offices. So that wasn't until the following Monday. So my training wasn't actually starting until a week after my orientation. So I had a week that I was going to just ride around with another technician. So I reported to the field office on Tuesday. Now, Tuesday is the meeting day. So first thing in the morning, all of the technicians that report to that office come into the office first, which is not usually what they do. Usually they go straight to their first job, right? But they all come into the office for the first hour of the day. They go over, all of the stuff they need to talk about, and they do like a 20, 30-minute training of whatever is going on, whatever is pertinent that particular week. So again, I've been at this job for essentially 4 hours, right? I did orientation and then went home. And I come in at 8 o'clock. I'm punctual. I'm there at 7:30. I'm ready to go. Hair coiffed, as it is now. Clean shaven. Hadn't grown the beard out yet. But anyway, so I go in, and they're super nice, and they're like, "Yeah, man, just come in here, and this is who you're gonna be riding with." Did all the introduction. He goes, "Come on here, sit in with me. We gotta go through this training for about an hour, and then we'll get going." I'm like, okay. So I'm sitting in the room, and they load up. And at first, it's just the regular stuff. They're going over numbers. They're going over KPIs, all that. And they're like, okay, well, let's get to the training. The training, and I kid you not, is how to know if you're in a meth house and what to do if you're in a meth house. Day two, and I am learning what to do if I'm in a house where they're cooking methamphetamines. Like, okay. Is this the job for me?
Hey, they told you about it before they made you carry a ladder around for 3 or 4 days, though.
That's true. And I go
That's
out.
Just safety training. That's the way it goes.
That's exactly what it was. It was safety training. Mm-hmm. And for those wondering, the recommended action once you realize you're in a meth house is get out of the house. Don't touch anything. That was like the safety training was leave the house, and it was a list of people you need to notify so that essentially we don't send anybody else to that house.
Were you supposed to notify law enforcement?
No, the technician is
really
not. So we notify supervisor, and then we had a specific security team. So the security team would then notify law enforcement. So they wanted to remove us as the technician out of it, and then the security team as the corporate entity would then handle it. So we did report, but the technician was not to call 911. The technician was to report to supervisor and security team, and then the security team would report to local authorities.
So note to self, when firing up my meth lab, don't call to get my cable installed. Is that what you're
That
like?
is
Get it
that is accurate.
installed and then fire up the lab? Is that what you're saying?
That yeah, exactly, exactly. Um, so yeah, I'll always remember that. That's like the first corporate training I ever took was how to know if you're in a meth lab.
That's awesome. I love it.
Okay, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. That
Nope.
popped it back up in my head.
I think it's hysterical.
All right, Tar. So what do you got for us on onboarding? I'm letting you, as Tara kind of alluded to earlier, she's done many articles on onboarding subject. I refer to her as our onboarding expert. She is extremely knowledgeable on this, so she's going to lead our discussion for most of this. So I'm just going to kind of let her go, and then we'll see where the conversation takes us. So, Tara, what do you have for us today?
Well, the first thing I want to talk about is the definition of onboarding and what that looks like and how it's changing. Orientation and onboarding are two different things in my mind, and this is how I always approach it. Orientation to me is the stuff like you mentioned, insurance information, your benefits stuff, all that, all the paperwork you need to fill out to go work at a new place. All of that kind of stuff to me is more orientation. If you really want to bring people in to your company culture and things like that, you want more than an orientation, because part of the things that we're seeing, especially in research and some of the data around retention, is that the better the onboarding, the longer people will stay. I think
Mhm.
that, and I'm going to like spout off a number and I'm close, but I don't think I'm exactly right. But it's like maybe I think like 41% of employees leave in the first year. And that's a lot of people that you're spending money to fill a spot, train them for a spot, get them in there, and they're leaving within a year. That speaks volumes to retention. And there are a lot of factors that go into that. I mean, there's management factors, there's all kinds of things that go into it. But when specifically asked about onboarding, the employees and things in a lot of these studies are basically saying that the better the onboarding, the longer they're willing to stay. And it's because
Mhm.
they feel like they're part of the company. It's not just about, hey, come in here, we're going to teach you how to do this job, and then plop, you're dropped into the pool, go do it. It's more about, we want you to work here. We want you to be part of the culture. We want you to be part of the company and really believe in what we're doing. That's, what they want. And so onboarding is more than a day, it's more than a week, it's more than a couple of weeks. The way that it's being looked at now is like there's a new buzz term, everboarding. Like you never let the onboarding experience end, basically. And it doesn't mean that you're constantly, drilling stuff at people. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about bring them in, make them feel like they're part of the culture, keep them up to date on things. A big thing right now too is, and this is going to sound weird, but honestly, if you're thinking about investing in an employee, sit down with them and talk about the career path. Sure, they have interviewed for this position and say they're widget maker level one, right? That's what they interviewed for. We're bringing them in. But they don't always want to be widget level one, a widget maker level one. They want to be a widget maker level three. So within the first few days, you sit down and you show them that career path and say, hey, you know, here's how you can achieve if you want to advance in this company. If you decide to stay, here's how we're going to help you do that. We're going to upskill you and we're going to help you proceed to these next levels and take this career path out to wherever you're like, the manager of all the widget makers. Whatever
Mhm.
your career aspirations are, we can help you do it, and you can do it here. You don't have to leave to do it. And that's a big part of what you're seeing with onboarding and things like that, moving to like everboarding. And there's another term that's come up. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, yeah, and I don't want to interrupt you here, but I do want to say
No, you're
you
fine.
said that You said that's crazy. I don't think that's crazy. Like I've from my discussions with outside of our company and just people friends of mine and
Hmm.
former colleagues and things like that. I think the number one reason that they have left companies is because lack of a clear um, progression plan. Like they don't
Right.
know, like they come in and they do a specific job for X amount of years, and when they started, it was great. Hey, I got whatever the pay bump was that I got to get this job.
Right.
Um, Unfortunately, the way that life is, inflation eventually catches up with us, right?
Sure.
So after 4, 5, 6 years, it's human nature to want to continue forward and continue up. So I mean, I don't think that's crazy at all. I think that's absolutely something that
No.
you at least need to know of. Um,
Hmm.
and I also think like that's a question that I added in like recommended interview questions
Hmm.
for the person being interviewed. Like if you go to an interview, I would say, "Hey, do you have a progression
Yep.
plan for this
That's
particular role?
right.
Do you have like thoughts about?" Because they're going to ask you, you know, what's your, where do you see yourself? That usual question, like, right, where do you see
Where do you
yourself in
want to be in
5 years?
5 years? Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
I always hated that question. God, I hated that question.
Yeah.
Um, but
What, sitting in
anyway,
your chair
yeah.
is not the right answer? What do you mean?
I so did that once. Did not
Did
get the
you?
job, guys. Just to let you know. Yeah.
I see me sitting in your chair in 5 years. What are you thinking?
Where you gonna be in 5 years, brother?
Where are you going to be? Exactly.
Right. Um,
Well, and here's
so
the
no.
scary thing, Jeremy, is just doing the kind of work that we do and seeing some of the things that we're asked to help with. The answer is oftentimes no, they don't have one. So
Yeah.
you should be asking for one. You should ask about it because that kind of can give you an indication depending on how long the company's been around and how big they are and that sort of thing. I mean, if you're working at a startup that's just getting off the ground and they're deciding what their hierarchy is even going to look like, that could be a little different. And so you have to approach those with different mindsets. But if you're going to work for a established organization, I would think that you would be like, what's the career progression for this particular spot?
Right.
And if there isn't one, is there another path within the company? Because I mean, you read things that say that the current generation that's coming into the workforce will job hop looking for
Hmm.
better things, which they will, and I am a huge fan of that. It's like, hey, if you're not getting what you need where you are, go somewhere else, go do it, go look for those things. But I think on the other side of that, as far as onboarding, moving to an everboarding type of thing, is there's another one in between there, and it's called reboarding. And basically, the thought behind that is whenever someone does progress from, say, widget maker level 1 to widget maker level 2, you give them a reboarding experience. Like if it's been 2 or 3 years, what's changed? What kind of culture
Ooh.
things have changed? What's been updated in the company? Go ahead and bring them back in because, after 2 or 3 years with the company, they might be kind of like, ho hum, yeah, I'm part of the family or part of the company or I feel it, but it might be waning a little bit. So reinvigorate the cultural piece of it by, just having them do some of the same things that they did whenever they onboarded, which we can talk about some of those experiences here in a few minutes. But by reinvigorating them every time they move up or move into a different position, it's like onboarding, reboarding, and then everboarding. And the everboarding piece is more like the continuing support and reinforcement to stuff they've already learned. It's every time they move to a new position, you do a new career progression plan, a new training plan. What does this upskilling look like every time you move, no matter how fast it is? And I always get reactions from people. It's like, oh, we don't have anybody to track that. We don't have time. And it's like, well, make time, because you're going to spend all your time recruiting and refilling those same positions over and over and over again if you're not putting the time in on this. So it's like, do you want to
Yep.
cultivate the talent you have, or do you want to constantly be out there looking for new talent, which is good too? It's always good to have new talent, but do you want to lose your best people to somebody else because you can't support them and help them in their career progression? I mean,
Yeah,
where do you
and
want
I
to spend
think,
your
and
money?
I think you tapped on it a little bit. You said that 41% number, and I think there's two ways to look at that number. So we're gonna lose 41% of the people we onboard. Um, so there's two ways to look at that. The one is, okay, well, why onboard them at all? That's a huge number. Why bother?
Sorry.
It's a waste of money for 41% of
Right.
our workforce, right? Um, but the other one is, okay, well, if we do it well, that number will go down. If we're
Yep.
doing, and again, you said a lot of stuff goes into that. Culture goes into that.
Mm-hmm.
Salary goes into that. The effectiveness of your managers goes into that. That's not just onboarding, but I do feel like
Right.
onboarding is a big part of it. Um, so I think if you can do your onboarding effectively, you can reduce that number a good bit. But it is getting past the fact, because I feel like a lot of people's knee jerk reaction is, well, if that's if that's, and I know you said that's probably not exact, because I feel like you're looking it up now.
I am.
um,
I am, because it's
yeah,
going to bother me. You know me.
it is. I know. Yeah, I figured. So
What do
I
you
feel like the knee
say?
jerk reaction is to say, well, then 41% is too high. I'm not going to do it. I think there's got to be an argument of, yes, 41% is high, but it's worth a good onboarding program to try to make it better, not to just throw it out the window and deal with the high number. So I mean, that's my 2 cents on it.
So I'm peeking here at statistics I pulled for these articles, and basically 69% of employees say they're likely to stay with a company for at least 3 years if they've had a great onboarding experience. And this is data pulled from a specific survey that talked about onboarding experiences and retention. So take it for what it is. But 69% staying, 3 years, that's pretty good. That's a good number. Oh, and
And
here's
I think
another
3 years is a
startling
big deal.
statistic. Here's a startling statistic for you. From Pew Research just last year, 2.5% of workers switched jobs every month last year in 2022. And whenever
Oh,
they did the math, yeah, like if you go look at that actual study, that's like 50 million people moving jobs. So that means there's tons of onboarding going on right now, whether you're doing it or not. There should
can't
be a
even
lot of onboarding going on,
can't even
right?
imagine change it. Like, that's 12 jobs in one. Are you kidding me?
That's a lot.
That
That's a lot.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm stressed out just thinking
yeah.
about that. Ooh, buddy, can you imagine that tax return? Jeez.
So, and I mean, that's not people left every month. That is like 2.5% of the whole population of workers changed jobs like monthly. Not necessarily the same person changed
Yeah, yeah, I
jobs,
know.
but that's how many people. But you know what? Looking for that better option or that better offer or better benefits. I mean, it's like we said, there's a ton of things that go into retention other than just onboarding. But when you look at onboarding, it's impactful. If you just bring people in and drop them in, I mean, how engaged are they in the company and its goals and its strategy
I can
and
tell
its
you, because it happened
purpose?
to me. Not at all.
Yeah, not at
Zero.
all. Yeah. Yeah. And in all the jobs I've had where I haven't had onboarding, now are there any of them that would an onboarding experience would have changed my mind about staying? The answer is no. But there were other reasons why. It was either, progression, leadership, management, that kind of thing. So it all depends on that. Also commuting. That was a big one for me at one point.
Mm.
So, there's lots of things that go into why people stay or go in a job, but onboarding is huge and it's very impactful for people, especially, I would say, and this is just from observing the populations, but like the younger people who are moving into the workforce now, they want that feeling of community. They want some of that cohesiveness, the feel of that whenever they're working somewhere, that they're on a team and that they're part of a team. And it's important. The, constructive feedback and all of those kinds of things are important, especially to people coming into the workforce. And Jeremy, you can add to that if you think that's important or not. Of course, you're a weirdo, so don't apply yourself to that.
Well, now I feel like I have to clarify that statement. So
You antisocial weirdo.
I
No, teasing.
I don't know if I qualify as all the way antisocial, but there's
No,
I do have
not all the way.
antisocial tendencies. No, you're absolutely right. I do have
Yeah.
a side of me that is very much developer. Like I like to be
Hmm.
by myself in front of the computer, like doing
Absolutely.
developing and making when I did have to go into an office, I made it
Yeah.
very clear that if my headphones are on, leave me alone. Like I'm in, I'm working. Like I've got Spotify or YouTube,
Yep.
lo-fi
Yeah.
beats going on in my ears. Leave me alone. I'm not going to talk to you. Um, so no, I mean, I do get what you're saying. I do have a caveat to, the work is a family thing. I feel like
See, I don't
I,
like saying that.
I
I
don't,
know.
and I've got it. And we're gonna do every time we do one of these, I'll write down another guys. We're gonna do a future episode on ID hot takes is what I'm calling it. So every time that we
Yeah.
come across one of these, I write it down, and that's one that I wrote down. I feel like that is a red flag
It
when a
is.
company
And
says,
I hate
"Hey,
saying
we all
it.
work as a family,"
Yeah.
and I say
No, we
that
don't.
all of the people that I work with here at Lumius, they're great. Like you guys, we're friends. We work well together. When we do get the opportunity to meet in person, it's fun. We have a great time together. We all get along. Um, but I don't feel like. Let me say this: I feel like when a company says, "Hey, we're a family here," when that's coming from management, what I
Yeah.
hear in my head is, we expect you to give us
Yes.
as much as you give your family, which I am not going to do. Like,
Yep.
guys, I love working with y'all. I do. It's great. I respect you all as colleagues and as people. You're fantastic. You're great. When it comes down between you and my wife and daughter, it's 100% my wife and daughter. I won't even think about it.
Exactly.
Like it's not
You're
even.
exactly right. And see, Jeremy, that is where no, 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 you're absolutely right. Because here's the thing. I was raised by boomer parents.
Mm,
And my dad owned his own business. He went to work at 7 a.m., didn't get home until 7 o'clock at night. He could never understand when I changed jobs. He could never understand how you couldn't
mhm.
just work in the same place for 30 years and be happy. And it's like, Dad, I want more than what this company can provide for me. And I think that, well, we're getting off the onboarding thing a little bit, but it's
We are.
like, it depends on where you come from. And like for me, I cannot with a straight face talk about being family at work because I don't believe it. So it's hard for me to say that. So the sense of belonging that I'm talking about is like the team belonging.
Right.
It's
And
not
it's
the family
different. It's
thing.
it's not a
And I've
familial
had to,
belonging. Yeah.
yes, and I've had to break myself of that, Jeremy, because I have let some of the way I was raised and some of those things, the loyalty aspect, the company loyalty type thing. It's like I've been burned by that many, many times
Mm,
because, I've been like, oh, I can't do that because, for whatever reason. But I have also learned that, I mean, a company will replace you within a week. So, it's, you know, everybody
well, it's
can be
different,
replaced.
right? Like you can't, and it's not saying like that. I don't necessarily see that as a negative on the company either. Like
No,
it's capitalism.
no,
Business is business, right? Like the
absolutely.
work still got
We
to
are
get done.
all absolutely.
Yeah, I
And the
mean
thing
it is what it
is work and life is life. And I am a big
Mhm.
advocate of, you know, you should have a life outside of work. And whenever people do say the family thing, they do tend to think, well, then 24/7, you're available to me
Yeah,
type of thing. So there is that.
yeah, and I do
So,
feel like it needs to be rebranded a little bit, right? Like
yes,
it's not a familial thing. Like honestly, like Tara, I believe that and I'll use our relationship. Like I've looked to you as
absolutely.
more of like a mentor and a friend,
Yeah.
and things like that. Like I reach out to you, behind the scenes glimpse here. She reviews a lot
Right.
of my stuff. I mess with her often because I do leave two spaces after all of my periods, really just to tick her off when she
Just to get
reviews
me.
stuff. It's hilarious every time.
Always.
Um,
Every time.
uh, but
You're the brother
but
I
but
never had, Jeremy.
exactly when it's one of those things where you know but at the end of the day, if something were to happen, like I have to understand that you have your life and you have to make the decisions that are
Mhm.
best for you, and the business has to make the decisions that are best for the business, and I have to make the decisions that are best for me. you know
Right.
when it comes to my thought about family is that I would sacrifice my well-being for theirs.
Yeah.
um, that's kind of my idea of family. For a business, I'm not going to, in most cases, I'm not going to sacrifice my well-being for the business. That's where I draw the
Right.
line, right? um,
Yep.
Now obviously I'm
Yeah.
not like I'll work over to meet deadlines and stuff like that. That's not what I'm
Sure.
talking about. That's minor things, but um but all right, we are completely off topic. Let's get back to onboarding. Um,
I mean, it all adds to retention. There's all kinds of reasons people leave and people stay. So when it comes to onboarding, I mean, we talk about things like, I mean, I'm going to add another term in there, pre-boarding, before they even
mm,
come onto the company. It's like, what are you doing before they even start? Are you just like, you do the offer, you do the negotiation, everybody accepts. We say first day is going to be on like Monday. And then what? Is it just radio silence? What are you doing in between there? There's a ton of things you can be doing. Like, do
let
you have a
me
swag bag welcome pack? Do you have,
Oh yeah, swag bag. Let me
get a
interrupt you. Let
swag
me ask you a
bag?
question
Go
because
ahead.
I
Hmm.
do have an honest question here because I have
Sure.
always wondered this. I have heard of pre-boarding before, so
Hmm.
my thought about pre-boarding is that it starts with the job posting. So my thought about
Hmm.
pre-boarding is it's everything prior to the to actually walking in on the first
Yeah,
day. But I didn't know
absolutely.
if that was accurate or not. So are we talking about
Yes.
all the way up to writing the job description and job posting, or is it just sending like does it start when I accept the offer or does it start when the job is posted?
There is, you can, well, there's data on both sides. There, you can read things about both ways. If you have a good onboarding program, it should be tied into your recruiting program, right? I mean, if you're going to have a cohesive onboarding and a cohesive experience and progression and all of this, it all fits together. It's all pieces of the same puzzle. It's just how developed are they and how well executed are they? So, pre boarding, when it comes to recruiting and all of that, yes, you should be putting your culture stuff in there. It should be in with your interviews. All of that stuff should be in there and inclusive of that. And then when you get to the actual part where somebody's going to accept an offer and you've agreed upon everything and a day's been picked, then you can really start, hyping it up. And this is about marketing. This is about advertising. This is about
Mm.
selling your company. This person just came on. Make them feel welcome. Record a video, have their manager record a video, have their team get on a Zoom call and record a welcome video that says, "We can't wait to meet you." Whatever. Send something, time it out. I've used QR codes before to build itineraries for people. Like, here's what your first day is going to look like. You know, Send them something on their phone that they can bring up that says, hey, you know, for example, I read something interesting. Does a new hire really need to start at 8 a.m. on the first day? Do they really? Wouldn't it be great if your team could get there, get organized, everybody could get stuff in place, get it all ready to go, instead of having to come in at 6 a.m. or 7 to get all of that ready to do an orientation or whatever the first morning is? What if you just had your new hire come in at 10 o'clock? So then you guys have everything ready to go, and your people are working on their regular schedules and they're doing what they need to do, and everybody's had their coffee, we're ready, we have a chance to get things
Yeah.
hyped up and set up for these
That
new
is
people.
such a good idea. So,
I mean, it's
and you
such
know,
a little thing, right?
yeah,
But
no,
who,
that's
I read
fantastic.
it and
And you,
thought, I read
yeah, no,
about it and
I never
thought
would have thought
that
about that.
makes
And
so much
as
sense.
yeah, so I am. My wife calls me chronically early, and
Yeah,
she's
I'm the same
beating
way.
some of this. She's beating some of this out of me. Like I would be 30, 45 minutes early to
Hmm.
everything.
Oh, me
I'm a little
too.
better
Yeah,
now. I'm 15
15,
to
20
20 minutes
minutes.
early.
Yeah,
Yeah, to everything now. So if my
yeah,
first day at my first job and they've got me starting at 8, I'm in the parking lot at 7 o'clock. I'm like, okay,
yeah.
I can't walk in at 7, but I'm going to sit here on my phone and flip through, whatever, I'm going to read the news. I'm going to flip through YouTube or Twitter or whatever I'm looking at
Exactly.
for, 30, 45 minutes. And then I'm going to walk in. And then, most people are not of my same persuasion. I know that. Um, and
Right.
I don't fault them for that, right? They're,
No.
everybody's different, but that means that me as a new employee, I'm now sitting there for another hour, essentially, just sitting there because I got nothing to do. So
Hmm.
again, I'm browsing stuff on my phone. A lot of times, maybe usually it's like the HR rep or the recruiting rep on your first day will come meet you, and they'll sit you somewhere, and the hiring manager will walk in around 8:30, 9 o'clock. So you're sitting there for like an hour with nothing on your first
Absolutely.
day. Um, no, that's a fantastic idea. I never would even thought about
Yeah.
bringing them in at a different time.
Mhm.
Um,
Why
so
not? I mean,
yeah,
and I
absolutely.
read about it too, and I thought, what a simple thing to do on the first day. It's like you said, first day that you went to that one job. You went in for a few hours and then you left the rest of the day because there was nothing else to do. What's wrong with
Yeah,
that? So, you know what? So you paid somebody for a few hours that they didn't actually quote unquote work. I'm pretty sure you're probably going to get it back at some point
oh yeah,
in the next few
oh yeah,
months.
they
Okay. So
absolutely
let's
got
all
it
just
back.
chill a little bit. So when it
And
comes
it's
to
a hard,
pre-boarding,
like I still look back at that, and that was and don't get me wrong,
hmm,
it was a hard job. I had a love
yeah,
hate relationship with that job. Let me tell you, but I still look back on it.
yeah,
The beginning of that job is a positive. Obviously, like I said, that was one of
hmm,
my positive onboarding
absolutely,
experiences. So they really did. They had a way of knowing that this was going to be rough on you to begin with, and they did as much as they could to start with because they wanted to keep
sure,
their turnover was high on new technicians because it's a hard job.
yeah,
You're dealing with the public, you're dealing with the elements, the
yeah.
physical activity. So
Well,
they knew what
and
they were
let's
doing
be
there.
honest, a little bit of that is probably the thin in the herd approach. But you know what?
Oh yeah, they let you
I'd
know.
rather know in the first 2 weeks that somebody's going to flame out than 6 months later or 3 months later after they've gone through this entire onboarding program, after they've done all these things. I mean, there's something to be said a little bit for that. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, this is going to be a hard job. You need to know the reality of that because there are
Yeah,
no
I mean there's
shortcuts.
yeah there's a reason they put the physical stuff in the first week, right?
Yeah.
Like you got to know if you can
Yeah.
physically do the job, and they don't discriminate. Uh, there was a female in my class who was actually still doing the job when I left the job. And,
Hmm.
she was probably half my size. She could lug that ladder around better than I ever could.
Yeah.
I could not mess with her when it came to any of the physical aspects of the job. Like she would just
Right.
beast it around. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. We see that, we used to see that a lot in firefighter training too, is that, it's not always about physical size. Sometimes it's about the technique. And, if you learn how to do it, anybody can, can do that kind of stuff. But, when it comes to welcoming somebody, get them, make it exciting. And then, first day, let's take it easy. Come in, do the orientation piece and leave, or come in and do orientation and then like tour the facility, talk to
Mm.
people. Don't, have a few scheduled things in there. If there's safety and compliance that need to be done, you have a couple of e-learnings or something. Sit somebody down, have them do them. Do not do not take a new employee and sit them in front of a bunch of e-learnings for like 3 days just because you don't want to deal with it. And you just are like, hey, go watch all these e-learnings and I'll talk to you at the end of the week. Do not do that. That is a terrible thing to do. That is terrible.
Hot take. Hot take. That's
Hot
not a hot
takes.
take.
That's a bad idea.
That is not a
That's
hot
just,
take. That is a fact.
that's just,
That's just unfortunately what happens at most companies.
So once you get somebody in the door, the first few days, we don't have to hammer them with everything. You do not have to just pound them with all of this information, because here's what's going to happen. They're not going to remember any of it like the next week. So it's like pepper training in with observations. And let me tell you something. I'm going to talk to you about the biggest secret of onboarding success that's out there. And it's not a secret, because like 40% of businesses do it and it's successful. Mentoring your onboarding people, your new hires. Now, if you have a formal mentor program at your company that's like a leadership type mentor program, I suggest you come up with either a different name or something else for it, but it's in essence the same type of thing. Your onboarding person, and we refer to them as onboarding buddies, onboarding partners, that kind of thing. But it is your new person's point of contact for everything for the first few months that they're there. This is the person that they can go to ask questions. This is that safe space. They don't always want to go ask their new manager a question, or even a peer, because people are afraid to fail, don't want to look stupid. But this is your safe person to go talk to. They're not there to evaluate you. They're not there to give you performance feedback. They're there to teach you and help you with the job, and help you with the social aspects of the job and working with your team and all of those kinds of things. So, and those are hugely successful. They make onboarding programs even more successful. Whenever I put one together, usually what I'll do is the first couple of weeks, I'll have a schedule written out where the new person is working with that onboarding partner like almost daily for the first couple of weeks. And then after that, it's like a couple of times a week. You just schedule like a 15-minute check-in and are like, hey, do you have any questions about what you did this week? Especially if you have developed your onboarding program in a way where people are attending learning events on certain times. What we've done is we put mentor packets together that basically have check-ins that coincide with those learnings. So then if you go to, say you go to an ILT or a VILT about how to use some new system, it's new to use system, right? So you go to that training on Monday and you're there Monday and maybe part of Tuesday or whatever. And then you have a mentor check-in on Wednesday that are specifically, there's some talking points around that written in case your mentors need a little help coming up with stuff to talk about, or a reminder of what this person was just doing. It's like, hey, I came in to take an Outlook class for 2 days, and now you attended your Outlook class. Tell me about that. Was there something do you have any questions? Was there anything you saw? And then you can provide them, here's how we use it, best practice, in our team, here's how we do things, and here's what's our expectation is, and that kind of thing. And it gives them that holistic approach to whatever that training event was. So it's not just a one-off, but they're also getting some reinforcement, right? Because we're asking them about it a few days later. And then work in some observation and like reverse observation to where like your new hire is watching their mentor do something, and then the mentor's watching them do something. And you can even create worksheets, go no go checklists, things like that that can verify, hey, I've learned how to do this, or I've watched this person do this, they're fine, whatever it needs to be. But it's just the interaction and the constant touchbacks, so that they know they're not alone, basically, and just being dropped
Yeah.
in.
I
So mentors are huge. Have you ever had that? Did you have that in that program that you went through at all?
um you're gonna regret asking me that.
Oh,
I
no, I'm
did.
not. Did you?
Uh, I, I did. Yeah. So we, in the 6 weeks, it was actually 4 weeks up front.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went out and we would ride again. Again, I started a week prior, so we would ride with our
Yep.
mentor that first week or however long. Not more than 2 weeks. It could be 1 to 2 weeks prior to the onboarding class
Sure.
starting, depending on how many people they hired. And then you go in for training for 4 weeks, and then you ride for another week, go back for a week, ride for a week, go back for a week, and then you come back out and ride for a week, and then you're on your own. So there was like a back and forth type thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there was no oversight into who they chose for the mentor. So the guy that I was
Yeah.
put with, the first week seemed like a nice guy. Seemed like a pretty laid back dude. Um, so the first week went by fine. Then I didn't talk to him for 4 weeks because I was in training. I was reporting to
Right.
the training center. Um, Came back out for that fifth week after training, and started to realize that he probably was not the best choice. Just because this was prior to now. There's a GPS tracker in all of the vehicles, so they know exactly where you're at all times,
Sure.
good and bad to that. Don't get me started. It's a whole other, I could do an hour on that just by itself. But so he would essentially do what we call sandbagging. He would say he was at a job, but he would have completed that job 30 minutes prior. You just go park somewhere in the shade and chill out. And like
Yeah.
4 or 5 technicians would drive, and they'd just be talking to each other for like 30, 45 minutes, killing time. And then all go their separate ways, do another 30, 45 minutes of work, come back to the same spot, chilling in the shade. And then after all of that, he was originally my first call, right? Because he was the one that I had, the most trouble with. And I found out that essentially everything I would ask him, he would then turn around and tell our boss, hey, he's asking about this. Hey, he doesn't know how to do this. Hey, he's having this. My boss at the time was not that great of a human being either. So there was one time where I called him to ask him a question. And then the next day I was written up for not knowing that. Now I was still at the job. I did it correctly while I was there. There was no impact to the customer, but I was written up for not knowing it, for calling somebody for help.
That's
And
bad.
at that point I was like, well, I am never calling this dude again. Like,
Exactly.
I am blocking your number from my phone. You will never hear my voice again, dude. Like, you just shot me in the back.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yes. And I don't regret asking you, because that illustrates the biggest risk to something like that is people who are not chosen appropriately to be mentors. First
Well,
off,
and it ruined the relationship between me and him,
of
because
course,
so he
of
went to
course.
do another role and then came back to our office as a supervisor later on.
Ah,
Luckily, not mine.
right.
But I was in a higher role. I was a senior technician at the time, essentially just one step below a supervisor. And we would get in like arguments where I
Sure.
knew that I was right and I was not going to back down from him. And it was animosity between us because it was not hidden
Right.
that we didn't like each other. Because,
Well,
I was
and
young and dumb and pissed off. Uh,
yeah,
so
no,
I
well,
confronted
but
him
that
pretty
kind of
much
thing,
immediately. So,
well, and the fact that he ended up being promoted or whatever later is just a perfect example of that kind of nonsense going on. But when it comes to mentors, especially with onboarding, any kind of mentor, this goes with any mentoring and coaching program. First off, They should be volunteers. Nobody should be voluntold to be somebody's mentor. Because if you have to tell somebody to do it, they're probably going to be resentful. They might take it out on that person. You just don't know what that looks like. First off, they should be volunteers. Second, you need to find out why they're volunteering. They should be interviewed for these types of roles. Because if you've got somebody who is on a power trip, and there are people who do that, who are just like, it's my way or the highway, and I just want to tell somebody else what to do all day, or I want to give them my work to do all day. You have to look out for the motivation on why somebody would volunteer for that. And then you look at performance. Make it something special to be able to do this for a new employee. Instead of making it an other task as assigned on somebody's job, description, make it an incentivize it if you can. I mean, we've got customers I know that we've done this with that have like internal company points and things like that they can give to people to incentivize it. Incentivize your mentors, but that makes it even more important to find out why somebody wants to do it, and you pick the right people. They have to have a certain kind of skills. Are they good active listeners? Can they give reasonable feedback? Do they, are they just decent human beings all around? You're not there to call out the new hire about what they don't know. You're there to teach that new hire what they don't know and to be the person that they can reach out to if they don't know it. The whole freaking point is to make them successful. It's not to eliminate them from from your company. That is not the point. So, I mean, and so mentors, it's like its own little piece within the larger onboarding picture. Right. Because another important thing that I want to throw in here, Jeremy, is performance metrics. If you are in a job that requires people to meet a certain number for a performance metric, and then you're asking them to also mentor someone, and that takes them away from their job, you have to adjust their performance metrics to account for the time they're putting in with this person. Because if they are so worried about, I've got to, take X number of calls every single day in order to meet my KPIs, they're not going to be giving the right amount of attention or effort into the mentoring piece of it. So you have to work with all pieces of it. And frankly, it takes all the way to the top to support that kind of stuff. You have to have the buy-in to get all of that stuff in place, because you can build all the beautiful onboarding activities and all of the wonderful check-ins, and you can build all the pretty programs you want. But if you do not have the capacity to support it, it's not going to be successful. And nothing is worse, I think, than hyping up this new program, putting it in place, doing all these things, and then 6 months later, it just fizzles out because you could never do it in the first place. So you have to think about it as a complete picture and a complete package of before they even start, through their career, all the way through what their career could look like at your company, not just what that first week looks like. And I always get this question, Jeremy. So how long does onboarding last? Onboarding lasts forever. That's why we have everboarding now. But yes, there comes a point, and that is determined whenever you first talk about an onboarding program. In analysis, do not try to just go throw stuff at the wall and build an onboarding program. Please do an analysis. I beg you to find out what you can support and what you can do before you start developing all your pretty pieces. Because, analysis will tell you what you need and what you can do in the end.
Boom. And that's our time, guys. I know that Tara could probably keep going for an entire hour.
Oh, we could talk for hours about this.
I'm gonna have to cut her off, because I could probably also continue to insert my anecdotes from all of my good and bad experiences. But we're gonna cut it off here. We appreciate you guys listening, and we'll talk to you next time, guys. Thank you.
All right, bye.